When World War II ended in 1945, the world was left in a state of shock and devastation. The fall of Nazi Germany and the defeat of the Axis powers marked the end of one of the darkest chapters in human history. But for the Allied powers, particularly the United States and the Soviet Union, the war's conclusion was not just the end of conflict. It was the beginning of a new, cold, and competitive struggle for global dominance. The Cold War had begun, and both superpowers were now engaged in a fierce race, not just on the ground, but in the skies. And at the heart of this new competition was space. As the world emerged from the ashes of war, both the United States and the Soviet Union recognized that space exploration and missile development would be essential for asserting technological and military superiority in the coming decades. But there was a catch. While both nations had ambitions to dominate space, they lacked the expertise to develop advanced rocket technology and technicians to work for America, bypassing any concerns about their wartime affiliations or the dark pasts of many of these individuals. A Nazi Party member, an SS officer who had been a key architect of the V-2 rocket program, his work would eventually become the foundation of NASA's space program and would help launch the US into the space race. This is where Operation Paperclip comes into play. A secretive operation that would allow the United States to harness the knowledge of Nazi scientists, many of whom had played key roles in the development of Germany's advanced rocket systems during the war. Operation Paperclip was the US government's covert program to bring German scientists, engineers, while Operation Paperclip was a scientific and technological success for the United States. It was also one of the most morally questionable chapters in American history. The Nazis, including many of the scientists recruited by the US, were directly responsible for the atrocities committed during the Holocaust and World War II. Some of the scientists, like Wernher von Braun, were deeply involved in the development of weapons used against the Allies, particularly in the V-2 rocket program, which targeted civilian populations in London and other cities. Despite this, the US government, driven by the need to outpace the Soviet Union in missile technology and space exploration, overlooked the troubling pasts of these individuals. Operation Paperclip was carried out by the US military and intelligence agencies, including the Office of Strategic Services, which would later become the CIA. It was designed to prevent the Soviet Union from gaining access to the expertise of the Nazi scientists, as the US feared that the Soviets would exploit the German rocket knowledge for their own military and space programs. While his past as a member of the Nazi Party and his association with the SS were not secret, von Braun was considered a genius in rocket development, and his work was seen as critical to the United States' goal of dominating space. Von Braun himself later stated that his primary interest had always been in rocket science, not politics, and that his allegiance to the Nazis had been a means to an end, albeit a morally complicated one. The decision to bring Nazi scientists to America was controversial from the start. Many of the scientists who were brought over had been deeply involved in the Nazi war machine, contributing to the development of weapons of mass destruction and technology that had been used against Allied forces. Yet, their technical expertise in rocketry and aerodynamics was undeniable, and the US government was willing to overlook their pasts in order to secure their knowledge for the new frontier of space exploration. For Wernher von Braun, the decision to join the US program was driven by his personal ambition and his desire to continue his work on rockets. Once the Nazi scientists were brought to America, they were integrated into the US military-industrial complex, specifically within the newly created US Army's rocket program. They were housed in special facilities where they worked on improving existing rocket technologies. The most notable of these was the Redstone missile, which was directly based on the V-2 rocket that von Braun had developed during the war. NASA's goal was to lead the world in space exploration, and the agency would rely heavily on the knowledge and expertise brought to the US by the Nazi scientists, particularly von Braun and his team. The Saturn V rocket, which was the largest and most powerful rocket ever built, would become the launch vehicle for the Apollo missions. Von Braun's leadership helped propel the United States into the space race, and the successful Apollo 11 mission in 1969, which saw Neil Armstrong land on the moon, was a direct result of the work of the German scientists brought to the US under Operation Paperclip. Von Braun was named director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, where he oversaw the development of the Saturn V rocket, essential to the Apollo missions that would eventually put a man on the moon. Von Braun, who had been given a prominent role in the U.S. Army's rocket program, quickly became a leading figure in the development of America's missile systems. His team of German engineers, who were housed at the Army's White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, helped develop a series of increasingly sophisticated rockets. Von Braun's leadership and expertise were instrumental in moving the United States into the space age. But his involvement with the Nazis and his previous work on the V-2 missile remained deeply controversial. The success of the U.S. Army's rocket program paved the way for the creation of NASA in 1958. Under von Braun's guidance, NASA's rocket program became the world leader in space exploration. While the technological achievements that came from Operation Paperclip were undeniable, the moral implications of bringing former Nazis to work for the United States are still a subject of debate. Many of the scientists involved in the program, including von Braun, were never fully held accountable for their roles in Nazi Germany. Their work, which had contributed to the deaths of countless civilians during the war, was now being used to advance America's military and space ambitions. One of the most troubling aspects of Operation Paperclip was the question of how the U.S. government could justify employing individuals with such deeply problematic pasts. The U.S. government was more than willing to overlook the past of these scientists, prioritizing their technical expertise over their wartime actions and space exploration, ultimately leading to the moon landing and the creation of NASA as a global leader in space. The story of these Nazi scientists, their work for the U.S., and the legacy they left behind is one of both technological triumph and moral ambiguity. His name is synonymous with the Apollo missions and the incredible technological advancements that led to the moon landing. The scientists brought to the United States under this operation were integral to the development of modern rocket technology and the rise of the space age, but their connection to one of the darkest periods of history raises difficult questions that continue to resonate today. But his past as a member of the Nazi Party and his involvement with the SS cannot be ignored. Von Braun's story is a reminder of the complexities of history and how the pursuit of knowledge and progress can sometimes come at a moral cost. On the other hand, it raised uncomfortable questions about the price of progress and the lengths to which a nation will go to secure its interests, even if it means employing individuals with dark pasts. For many, the opportunity to develop rocket technology for the United States and to participate in the space race justified the moral compromises made by the government. The legacy of Operation Paperclip is complex. On one hand, it allowed the United States to leap ahead in the field of rocket science today. Wernher von Braun is remembered as a visionary in the field of space exploration. Operation Paperclip remains one of the most controversial and shadowy chapters in the history of the Cold War, and its legacy continues to spark debate about the intersection of science, ethics, and politics. In the end, Operation Paperclip was not just about rockets or space exploration, it was about the lengths to which nations will go in the pursuit of power, and the ethical compromises made along the way.